S&P 500. I guess a basic question here: will the good times continue to roll for the broad equity markets into 2022?
Yeah, great to be with you. And yeah, it's a good question. And the market's up about 30% this year, the S&P on a total return basis. And with that in mind, yeah, I think the good times will continue. And, there's a nice setup here. The 10-year basically right at 1.5%. The earnings yield on the S&P 500 is about 5%. So that spread is as robust as it was before the pandemic started almost 2 years ago now. So yeah, very bullish. And I think 2022, it won't be 30%. It would be my only prediction, but I think it'll be quite strong.
Yeah, Josh, maybe not surprising to see some energy names among your guys' top picks here for next year. And of course, energy led the way in 2021, and it was a sector that really kind of got overlooked, right? Because who wanted to be long oil after what we saw play out in 2020? And yet, it has proven to be the right side of the bet to be on. So, I mean, when you look at 2022, we're already seeing oil prices come off their lows in the Omicron scare. What do you see in terms of the supply and demand dynamics playing out next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, energy, kind of E&P, oil, natural gas, there's been a lot of volatility in the supply demand picture there. Seems to improve by the day. What we focus a lot more on, in our gas utility fund are obviously utilities, power generation and distribution. And as strong as pure energy stocks have been, what have been less strong have been utilities this year. So utilities are up about 15% on the year, which is great, but it's not 30%. It's not the market's return. And I think some reversion to the mean is in order. There's a nice setup in terms of dividend yield. It's about twice that of the market for utilities broadly. And I think that it's a great way to kind of play, a recovery and a return to fundamentals. And certainly there's, a lot of high quality names within the utility space.
Hey, Josh, some people say this is stock pickers market. If that is the case, are there certain names within the utility space that you particularly like?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I always say it's always a stock pickers market. There's always room to try to outperform an index. So, within the Hennessy Gas Utility Fund, we would point to two names that are relatively large positions in the fund. The first would be Southern Company, a diversified utility based in Georgia, serving the Southeast. And also Sempra Energy, so a little bit more of a diversified utility, some midstream assets, some LNG exportation exposure, as well as traditional, regulated utility activity out in the western part of the country.
And I guess, when we look longer term over 2022, there are dynamics that are a bit more macro. Everyone's looking at the Fed and what they're going to do in terms of their three projected rate hikes for next year. I mean, how do you see that maybe changing the dynamics? Of course, there's already a lot of fears around what the taper would have looked like. We saw that accelerated. I mean, what are your expectations for the market writ large in terms of how investors might navigate some of that volatility if it matches what we saw here in 2021?
Sure. Yeah. I think that, the Fed is always front and center on everyone's minds, and they've, rightfully so changed their language around the taper, and they've accelerated that, and they've made it clear where that's going. 3 rate hikes in 22, which is, I think, consensus. That doesn't seem crazy. About a week ago, I thought to myself that seemed aggressive, given what was going on with the new variant of the virus and case counts and all of that. And I think, the market has gotten a lot more comfortable with where or how we're progressing in that regard. So certainly a slowing of the economy in 22. We're going to go from almost 6% growth this year to just under 4% next year. But I think that the Fed has done ultimately, and people can quibble about whether it should be 1, 2, or 3 rate hikes or even more. But at the end of the day, they communicate, I believe, quite effectively. They're forthcoming. They're quite humble. They've admitted that they were a little bit behind the 8 ball on inflation, and I think everyone agrees. But I think that the Fed won't be the issue in 22. I think they've made themselves clear to the marketplace. I think the issue, if there is an issue, it will be something that we're not talking about right now.
Yeah, we will see. I mean, 2022 certainly seems like the big watershed moment, at least could be, for the Federal Reserve. But Josh Wein, Hennessy Gas Utility Fund Portfolio Manager, thanks so much.